You are listening to the IoT for All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT for All podcast on the IoT for All Media Network. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon, one of the co-creators of IoT for All. Now, before we jump into this episode, please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or join our newsletter at iotforall.com/newsletter to catch all the newest episodes as soon as they come out. So, without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT for All podcast. Welcome to the IoT for All podcast, Hope. Thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thank you, guys. I'm excited.
Great. I'm joined with my co-host, Caleb McClelland, who runs the operations for IoT for All and is one of our most prominent writers. Say hi, Caleb.
Hi, everyone.
There you go. All right, Hope. So let's, I think the best way to kind of start this off would be if you could take a moment to kind of introduce yourself to the audience, give a little insight into who you are and, what you do for Texas Instruments.
Yeah. So, like you said, my name is Hope Bobenzi. I am an automotive systems engineer at Texas Instruments. I think a lot of people think of Texas Instruments, if you're not in the industry, as the guys who do calculators. We do a lot more than that. We're actually a semiconductor company. So we build all the little microchips, integrated circuits that go into every single one of your electronic devices. And I particularly focus on automotive systems, and within that, telematics, which is essentially the connectivity of the car. And I build reference designs that help our customers at top tier ones and OEMs help accelerate their design process, especially for infotainment systems and telematics systems in their cars.
Could you break down what more detail about what telematics is? I mean, it's a term that I think a lot of people know.
Yeah.
In the industry probably get it right off the bat. But I think there's a lot of people who probably heard of telematics and know, especially when it comes to connected car and autonomous vehicles. But can you break it down to kind of layman's terms so people could kind of grasp I get what that means when they kind of hear the explanation?
Right. Yeah. Telematics is, it's essentially making your car an IoT device. If I were to really break it down, telematics is the common term in the automotive industry. And it really started, if you think about the evolution, started with emergency calling, which is a mandated legislative measure in the European Union now, starting actually almost a year ago, where all new cars had to have emergency calling features in a new car sold. And it started off like that about 10 years ago. And then slowly you started putting more connected things into it, like GPS.
Right.
So not only is it a cell phone anymore, it's got a cell phone and GPS. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. There's so many aspects of connectivity that are in the car today or are being designed into cars today. And that's what telematics really encompasses.
So I guess when you're kind of going back to the start of telematics, I mean, that's when they're putting in connectivity into the car for the first time, not just obviously the service, but that's putting in a cellular connectivity or some way that they can contact. And is that kind of what led, I guess, maybe people here are more familiar with things like OnStar and that kind of device?
You got it. You hit the nail on the head. Okay. OnStar is GM's version of telematics or emergency calling.
Okay.
And they were actually kind of ahead of the times, which is funny because the mandate for emergency calling actually happened in the European Union.
Gotcha.
So most people know OnStar. That's probably the most tangible thing here in the United States, but around the world, there are different kind of versions of that, even across different OEMs or automotive manufacturers. They call it different things. So that's what telematics is.
Yeah. So when it comes to telematics, I think most people can think about things like OnStar or using GPS navigation within their vehicles. What are some other examples of telematics that are really valuable that are in use today that people might not be as familiar with?
Oh my gosh. It's something that's so exciting in the industry right now because we call it the connected car. I think you guys mentioned it already. But the connected car, it's just adding connectivity, any sort of connectivity, and just more and more of it into the car. So yeah, it started as a cell phone being added into a car and then adding a little bit of GPS. But from there, it's grown to, your remote keyless entry to just unlock your car. But it's even gone into something called V to X, or vehicle to everything, which just is everything being the just a way to say like vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to cloud. I think that's the next big trend for automotive. And that's something that automotive manufacturers are actively designing. And what that will enable is so much. You start to see it already with vehicle to cloud communication, where you can do over-the-air updates in your car. So you don't have to just like wait for a new car model to come out to get an updated infotainment system. You can do over-the-air updates and update your car, every couple weeks or so, whenever a new update is pushed from the manufacturer. But not only that, you have something that's being discussed in the automotive world called vehicle-to-vehicle communication, which essentially allows cars to talk to one another. And that's going to be really important as we go to higher levels of autonomy, really level 3 autonomy and beyond, where it will put a more predictive approach to a reactive mechanism. So right now with autonomous driving, you have radar or LiDAR that's like sensing the world around the car, and putting a connectivity feature like vehicle to vehicle communication into the car will allow the car to actually talk to its environment. That's something that I'm really excited about.
Wow. Yeah. So I think there's a lot there to dig into, which
I know,
yeah.
Right?
So I guess just to summarize, in talking about V to X, one way maybe one could think about it would be just as our smartphones have the capacity to connect to a variety of different things. So to a Wi-Fi network, or to cellular, or to Bluetooth, and all of these different things enable different applications. So you can call people via cellular network. You can use cellular or Wi-Fi to access various applications. You can use Bluetooth to connect to things in your local environment, like speakers. In a similar way, with vehicles adding different kinds of connectivity, suddenly they can now begin connecting to different things. And so they can connect to the cloud, vehicle to cloud, as you mentioned. They can connect to other vehicles. They can connect to infrastructure, like potentially stoplights or things around them. And then potentially connect to people, which we can either talk about now or later. I'm curious what that looks like. But for the vehicle to vehicle, I'm really curious there, because it seems like, I feel like I remember reading years ago in like Popular Science or something, talking about the cars of the future and how they might all communicate with each other and use that to coordinate with traffic or to avoid colliding with each other. And that seems great as a vision, but it also seems to me, now having worked in the IoT industry, that there are some barriers to that. Like, okay, well, what are the standards for how these things communicate? What things are they communicating?
Right.
So what does that look like? Like in what form would they be communicating? Does it make more sense that they would communicate up to the cloud? There'd be some centralized thing in the cloud that would then talk back down to vehicles? Or are there cases where it really does make sense for vehicles to talk directly? And what are some of those cases?
Yeah, I think all the questions that you just asked are the questions that the industry is asking right now too. And they're still being determined, actually. Right now you have a big battle. You may not know it, but there's a battle going on between cellular V2X and DSRC, which stands for Dedicated Short Range Communication. DSRC has been around for a couple decades, I believe. It's a long-standing standard that people are familiar with. And you also have cellular V2X, which is exactly what it sounds like, cellular enabling technology. And these are two different types of standards. And I don't want to go too much into the nitty gritty of the technical, but there are different bodies, different groups that are pushing for these different standards. Right now, it's kind of DSRC is the status quo and what has been adopted or what governments have supported and kind of protected the frequency band that it operates in. But 5G, as everyone's anticipating, a lot of people are pushing for 5G and the cellular version of V2X, which they both have different trade-offs, obviously, but it's something that is really difficult to align on. A lot of people, a lot of companies and legislators have to play nice in order to kind of agree on these different standards in order for them to work, because when it comes to anything connected, you have to have multiple connection nodes and points, and you have to agree on that standard at some point. So that is something that's being decided on. It's literally legislation across the world, even here in the United States, this is being discussed right now. You also asked a question about whether it made sense to connect to the cloud first versus just car to car. And I think it's going to be more car to car as opposed to connecting to the cloud first, because what if you don't have that connection? So these DSRC cellular V2X can operate without network connection. And if it becomes a safety critical application, you're going to have to be able to rely on it even without a network.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So the idea would be that if you're out somewhere without a cellular tower and the only way you can communicate with the car next to you is you have to go up to a tower, then back down to that car, then in the absence of cellular connectivity, there wouldn't be any communication. So that makes sense to me. But what I'm curious about is, what are some of the either current or imagined benefits of when vehicles, or if vehicles could talk directly to each other? Like, what are some of the use cases for that kind of connectivity?
Yeah, I started to kind of go down that explanation a little bit earlier, but I'll give you a more specific example. Adding some sort of connectivity as just imagine driving down a road and you've got a more autonomous car. It's probably level 3. So you've got some sort of autonomy already. And the car stops in front of you.
Can you explain level 3?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I know I'm in the automotive world and I just assume everyone knows what level 3 is. Generally speaking, level 1 is feet off. So it's kind of adaptive cruise control. Level 2 is hands off. So it's kind of that lane line guidance. Level 3 is where your eyes are off, but there's still like a backup. You still have to kind of be in control of the car in case something happens. And level 4 and beyond, it's kind of steering wheel is optional. And so level 3, when your hands or when your mind's off when your mind is kind of off of the situation, when your hands are, or when your eyes are off of the situation of the road, that's really where we think that vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to X will be more useful. There's a better business case because it's putting a predictive component to a reactive component in the car, which is the LiDAR or autonomous portion of the car.
So I have a question. I think this has been a discussion point that I've had with other people. So when you get to this level 3 autonomy with the cars, what happens when you're interacting with cars that don't have the technology in them? Older cars. Like how does work? I mean, that's as challenges like on the surface, right? But are there ways? Do you believe that there'll be ways to kind of integrate this technology into kind of, let's say, legacy cars, or is it going to kind of really not be able to be a full effect until every car is able to kind of be have the technology in it?
Well, there's a certain threshold that you have to overcome with the number of cars on the road that have certain amount of connectivity to be able to establish, say, even a traffic pattern. And it's not that high, actually. I think it's like around 10 to 15%. And if you live a densely populated area like I do in Silicon Valley, then it becomes a little bit easier to probably get to that threshold with the amount of connectivity you have on the roads already, the connected cars that you have on the road. But yeah, I think you have a good point. There is backwards compatibility there. We are seeing that today, even with aftermarket solutions is what we call it, where you can plug in connected devices to your car. And you see that, I mean, I think you've seen it with like insurance trackers. That's one example of it. But there's these things called OBD dongles that you plug into your car that have like Wi-Fi hotspots, that have GPS tracking, that have cellular connections to add emergency calling in the event of an accident into your car. So I do think that there will be aftermarket solutions in the future, as we're seeing more cars just integrated at the OEM level, at the automotive manufacturer level. But you're right. There has to be a certain a threshold. The number of cars on the road have to have a certain amount of connectivity or a certain amount of autonomy for them to interact well. And same with the connectivity, whether it be DSRC, the dedicated short range communication, or the cellular V2X, whatever our legislative bodies decide to go with.
Gotcha. So one of the things I'm curious is this might not even be relevant at all, but a lot of the way we kind of figure out traffic patterns now is through our cell phones, like with Waze and in Google Maps, for instance. Do you see any kind of benefit for that once this we kind of reach that level 3 and these cars are talking more to each other, or do you see they kind of work as a complement, or what are your kind of views there?
Are you asking if, say, using Google Maps will still be necessary in the future, or if your car will just be able to do it on its own?
Yeah, I kind of more the latter, and kind of figure out where is there not just value in the Google Maps and the Waze type tools, but is there a way that they may be able to kind of help with the process?
I think so. I think that, tapping into Google Maps, I think that would be a very useful tool. I think that begs the question of, how is it being utilized? Is it tapping into it on your phone, or is it tapping it into an internal system in the car? And of course, that gets into security questions, that gets into safety questions, reliability questions, because when it comes to the connected car, it really is an IoT device, but the safety and security implications are pretty severe. And I think that's a question that a lot of OEMs and tier ones in the automotive world are asking.
Gotcha. Cool. Kel, you got anything?
Yeah. So I guess speaking of, you mentioned inside the car and talking about Google Maps and Waze and things that are currently on the phone, but perhaps might migrate to within the car itself. Taking a look inside the car as cars continue to become smarter and more connected, and potentially moving to level 3 or even to level 4, where people don't need to have their eyes on the road, or at level 4 to even have to be in the driver's seat. What does that begin looking like, or what are some of the things you're excited about as far as how that begins to change the experience within cars?
Oh my gosh. Just I love this question because it's like, picture your ideal commute scenario, and that's what it's going to be in the future. I hate sitting in traffic, as I'm sure everyone who's listening to this does.
They might be in traffic.
I hate, yeah, right. Like everyone hates it. It's a common hatred for traffic, or even looking for parking. How stressful is that, right? Looking for parking, sitting in traffic. These are things that we'll be able to outsource to connectivity in the future. The example of looking for parking, like your car will be able to talk to a lamppost or to that building over there, and that building saying, hey, there's a free parking spot right here. And your car just drives to it and you don't have to worry about it. Or your car is, taking you to work and you're able to sit there in your connected car. It has Wi-Fi capabilities. And if you're a good employee, you're doing work, you're sitting there and answering emails. Or if you need a little bit of a break, you're streaming something off of Netflix, and you can do that all right in your car. And it's kind of a seamless environment. I think that's what is really going to happen, what people really, from a consumer level, are pushing for. They want more of their home or office environment in their car. They want a seamless transition and be able to be productive, be able to relax, spend family time, or like working time in the car. And that's, I think, it's not going to be wasted time anymore. It's going to be useful time. We're going to get that time back in the day. And I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to.
When I was at CES, went to I guess BMW had this big exhibit and they had this VR experience that they put me through, put the headset on, sit down, driving the car. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to basically go through levels of autonomy where, you're only controlling the steering wheel. You're not controlling the steering wheel. You're sitting there. Then the whole entire windshield turns into a computer monitor. Your calls, your friends are calling you. You're talking to your friends. You're watching the football game. You're unlocking the door to your house. You're doing all of this stuff from your car. And I know, at least at a high level, we didn't really get into this yet, but kind of learning a little bit more about what your role is when it comes to like that infotainment side of things. So as autonomous vehicles kind of reach these levels 3, 4, and beyond, the design of that probably brings along with it some exciting and maybe scary challenges to building that infotainment and that entertainment system for the driver. I'd just love to hear from your side of things, kind of what those challenges may look like and kind of what you're most excited about or maybe scared about when it comes to building those infotainment systems. Like what kind of opportunities there really are for you to kind of like unleash your creative side to kind of go down a whole new path than we've ever really been able to go down before.
I love that you called it my creative side too. And I think it's funny because being an engineer, like people don't necessarily think of us that way. But really it takes a lot of creativity to kind of imagine this world, or even designing, I design like circuit boards for reference designs for these systems. And it does take a lot of creativity to overcome different challenges, different trade-offs in these systems. I think that, my boss said it very well a few years ago. We've made this transition from having a computer in a car to building a car around a computer. And I mean, I think I heard the average number of, we call them ECUs, or they're just essentially little computers in the car. The number of them in the late 90s was like 3. And now there's like 120 on average. It's really more computer than it is machine. And I think just figuring out how to make it all work together in a safe, reliable way, right. I think that's everyone's biggest challenge, right?
For sure. That kind of like leads into another point, which is, how do you're balancing this, let's say, next level infotainment system as being interactive and valuable to the user, but also you have to kind of watch the line of it being distracting, just in case the driver has to do something. So yeah, I mean, there's just so many different components of it. What do you think when it comes to kind of those topics of that, distracting first, balancing that with the value and the interaction that the driver has when you take the driving part out of it?
Yeah, I think that we're at a pivotal point right now where we have to find that balance. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, every engineer that I come across here at Texas Instruments, even at OEMs, automotive manufacturers, and tier ones, they're very concerned about that, making sure that it's not distracting, that we are enabling the user to be safe in what they're doing, but also getting the right information and the right connectivity as well. We're at that pivotal point right now where it's, we're not at level 3 autonomy. We're not at level 4 or level 5. We're really only at 2.5 in some new cars. And, it's going to be something that will enable us to do so much more. But right now it's a huge design consideration to make sure that you are not being distracting at all. But being able to interact with your car in a safe, reliable way. Yeah.
And thinking about it from not just the, your side being the creative and being the engineering side of it for the design, but also from the driver. When they put that headset on, obviously I know it's virtual reality. I know I'm sitting in a room. I know nothing's going to happen. But when you really get immersed in it and you're sitting there driving and you start to think about yourself as a driver, as you've been driving for X number of years, and then all of a sudden the dashboard is a TV screen or a computer screen, and you kind of lose the thought of you're actually in a car, which is great from a getting your time back, being able to provide more value than driving. But there's also a level of anxiety that gets attached to it, where it's like you can't see anything. I mean, obviously you could probably turn it off and see out the windows, but you're in full trust mode at this point. Like you're just trusting that the car and the telematics and all the other cars around you and the drivers, everything is going to be fine, because if you're looking at your screen, you're not seeing another car possibly running into you or anything like that. And I think there's that whole hurdle that we kind of have to get over. And I think especially, maybe in the older generations, that's going to be a hard hurdle to get to. I mean, they're scared of using cell phones for things and putting their, information out on the internet. So I feel like you're going to get to a point where you're going to have a big group of people who's going to be scared, especially when a lot of the cars on the road maybe are not connected. But what are your thoughts kind of on balancing and kind of curbing that fear? Because again, I was in a virtual reality environment, but there was a little bit of anxiety, that was, to be honest with you.
Right. I know. I think that's such an interesting take on it, because there's not just like the advancement of technology, there's the ethics of it, and there's the perception of it, right? You do have to think about the people that are like, no, well, I like driving.
Right. Sure.
I like driving my car. Like, I don't want to give that up. Or you have people that are like, no, I don't trust the system. And I think that it is something that we'll have to overcome kind of as a society. Honestly, these cars, these autonomous cars, there's a lot of there's plenty of things on the news nowadays, like when they fail, but the percentage, the failure rate compared to people failing in the car is a lot lower.
Absolutely.
It's just a matter of perspective.
It's a better headline.
Honestly, yeah, right. Yeah, right. For me, I know I am the dumbest thing in my car. I really am. I've got computers that are not failing as often as I do. And it is something that we're going to have to overcome as a society, just kind of changing that perspective. But I think one thing that is that we have to keep in mind is that it's not a unit step function. And I guess that's the engineer coming out in me again, but it's not just going from 0 to 1 when it comes to autonomy or connectivity. It's a gradual process. Sure. And I think that a lot of times, like, people envision like, oh, autonomy, like you are lucky because you got to see those different steps, like maybe all in over a span of 2 minutes, but you got to see those different steps. And I think that these steps, although we have made so much progress in the past 15 years in the automotive world, I do think that, there will be time to acclimate, because as you already mentioned, cars are going to have to interact with connected cars are going to have to interact with non-connected cars for a little while. Autonomous cars are going to have to interact with non-autonomous cars for a while. So there's going to be it's less of an intersection and more of a transition. And I think that people will be able to adapt just like they adapted to cell phones.
Right.
Just like they adapted to flying in airplanes. Sure. I think that with every technology, there will be that adaptation, but there are perceptions that some people will have to overcome in order to really accept that growth.
Right. And I've kind of, speaking from personal experience, just like the cars that I've had over the years, I've kind of gone through a similar progression that I can see how at large scale that can help. But it definitely, it's like, holding your hand, kind of baby steps to get used to this technology. So for instance, like my car has a ton of different technology-based safety features. So it has the adaptive cruise control. So it'll adjust based on the car in front of me and the speed I set, the lane departure warnings and a few other things. But the one thing that was like the scariest to get used to was the adaptive cruise control, because I would set it on the highway, and then eventually the highway would turn into a road with a light, and the cars in front of me would stop, or you'd be in traffic, and your car would be making its own judgment on how fast it can go behind that car before it needs to start to slow down before it comes to a dead stop. And it's not the same pace at which I do it. So when the car does it and kind of like slows down much closer to the car than I would, it's like, your hands are like on the wheel, your feet are hovering above the pedals, like just in case it's but it does every time. It's just like the repetition and just getting used to this being now the norm, because it's not interacting with another car. It's just using its sensors to say, okay, there's a car this far in front of me. Obviously, environmental conditions could affect that, but for the most part, it works every time. But the first couple of times, I'm like, is this car going to slow down? Like, why? What's going to happen here? And then eventually, then it does. And then, every time you do it, okay, now you feel more comfortable. But I think that's kind of hitting to your point where this progression through, the next car somebody buys has these features in it. And then the next car somebody buys has, the next level of features in it. And just throughout time over the next number of years, just becoming more of the norm for little pieces. And then overall, we start to really transition. And it's like, how do we live without these things?
Yeah, this transition, I think, is really, like this gradual or somewhat gradual transition, I think is really important to highlight, not only in terms of how people adopt it, but in terms of implementation. And what I mean by that is when looking at all of the wonderful and scary things that some of these new capabilities within vehicles can do, it's tempting to immediately jump to a future in which all vehicles are like that. But vehicles are expensive and people hold on to them for years.
Very true.
And same with lots of infrastructure that would need to change. I love the idea of having a parking lot that can talk to my car and let me know, oh, there's a parking spot open here. But that's going to necessitate the infrastructure in that parking lot being built so that it can communicate in some way. Who's paying for that? Is it the parking lot? Are they incentivized? Maybe. But like a lot of these things, it's easy to look at the future and say, here's what this world could look like, but it's not going to happen in the snap of our fingers. It's going to be this transition and so that's very interesting to me, is like, not only what does the future look like when all vehicles are autonomous and we can have wonderful dreams about what that might be, but how do we actually get there? Because there will be this transition where some percentage will have some level of autonomy, but most won't, because they are older cars. And people might take some time to upgrade to the new one and purchase the new one, particularly with vehicles, which can last, you can have a car for a decade. So I think it's something important for people to keep in mind. Is like, it's fun. Also, it's fun to look at the future and think, wow, like what would it look like when all vehicles are like this? But it's also important to remember that the future is built in the present. So there's also the consideration of how do we get there? And part of how we get there is taking into account the way things are now. And So you can't just build cars that are, oh yeah, this car works because it can talk to other cars and therefore be autonomous. Well, that doesn't work if most cars aren't already like that, which they won't be. So it needs to be autonomous to some level, independent of vehicles that are, dumb cars until more catch up.
There's a lot of industries that are affected by this too.
Right.
Like, you got to think about, this is not something that I'm too connected with, but I was sitting at a restaurant the other day watching TV. For some reason they didn't really have any sports on. They just had the car auctions. So you have these people who are spending tons of time collecting cars, driving cars. And like you mentioned earlier, Hope, is people just love to drive, right? So there's just different things that are going to change. The insurance industry is probably affected by this. There's a ton of different areas that, unless they're all on the same page, I feel like this transition, maybe it's not so much the technology that's going to hold this up. It's going to be the perception, the consumer adoption, the regulations and stuff. It's a very interesting experience just to kind of talk through because we're living in it now.
Yeah, I think that you guys have great points. And I think it just highlighting it again, it's a transition period and it's something that we gradually get used to. I like to use the example of your smartphone. How many years ago did you not have a smartphone? It was probably 10 years ago, right?
Sure.
A lot of people have had smartphone for nearly a decade now. And honestly, I can't imagine living without it. And I think I'm curious about even your car, where you're saying you have adaptive cruise control, where you have the lane departure warnings. And you said the first couple of times that you're using this, I felt anxious for you because I know that feeling of oh, do I trust the steering wheel to keep me in the lane line? But I bet you sit in traffic and you are just I can't imagine not having this anymore. It's such a great asset, and it just keeps, to your guys' point, it just keeps building on itself. As you said, it's the technology. It's not something that you're just developing for the future. It's for today. You have to build that today. And we have the technology now. We have the technology to enable all of these features. It's just a matter of environment, the environment, the perceptions, the implications, the ability to engineer it quickly. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors that go into these systems. And so it does lend itself to that gradual buildup as opposed to just that unit step function.
Yeah, there are two more points I want to make, and then we can kind of transition to the Ask IoT questions. But one is, it's funny that I give you this story about me driving my Jeep and kind of these different technologies and how hesitant I was. But I was put in a Tesla one day to go drive it and try the autopilot. And I was completely trusting. I took my hands, I took everything off and was this thing's it has to work. Elon said it worked, so it's going to work. And so I was just in the car with 3 other people and was never tried this before on a highway. He's yeah, just take your feet off, take your hands off. It'll drive you around the corners. I was all right, cool. And just did it. And, but then I'm hesitant with my own car, about to, just stop behind the car. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. And then
maybe it's a liability.
Yeah,
liability thing.
It's his fault. The guy told me the sales guy told me.
Yeah.
But the other point I wanted to make, and something we didn't really talk about, but it's interesting question is the environment and how this plays into the whole shift into cars communicating with each other and what they're able to do. Because I know, for instance, if you can't read the lanes, my sensors on my car will not work, or if they're covered by lots of snow, how limiting is that? I have to do it manually. Can a car drive itself autonomously when it can't see anything but just white snow and different depths? How do you guys think about those different, or how do you, I don't know if it's necessarily something that you're particularly working on, but have you kind of heard or kind of different approaches to how different environmental factors will play into the development of or affect, the autonomous movement?
Well, you're just making the business case for connectivity.
Sure.
Because if you have, say, a lamppost that is able to tell you where the edge of the road is, then that's where it works hand in hand with autonomy. And I think it's tough because I think a lot of times we look at the business case, like adding these connected features, it's an added dollar amount into the car. And what is the business case for that? Why would someone pay more for something that they're used to having, or that should just help with safety? And I think those are the types of things that really do make a business case. Adding that connectivity into to help with like brutal road conditions, or a construction site that's up ahead that just got adding that connectivity feature to tell your car to slow down because there's workers on the side of the road. Right. Adding that opting in for data capabilities in order to access certain like a coupon as you drive past an In-N-Out here in California. So it's like those types of things do add to the business case, and that's why I think connectivity in the car it's gonna happen, and it's a really exciting opportunity that will unlock a lot of cool features.
Definitely. Caleb, anything before I get into Ask IT stuff?
I was thinking,
a huge smile on his face.
I was thinking about debating whether to. I was mulling over something in my mind, I guess, just to give you a window into my thought process. I was thinking about your comment about the lamp potentially telling you where you are if the road conditions are such that you couldn't read the lines on the road. My thinking was, does that actually make sense? Like, would you have, because who would be installing the lampposts and maintaining them? Wouldn't it be cheaper just to paint better lines on the roads?
Well, like 6 inches of snow on top.
Well, that's true, right? And then I started going down the rabbit hole of, okay, that could work because it actually probably would be cheaper to just paint better lines on roads. But then if it's extremely reliant just on the lines, that could open it up to to bad actors who might just go out onto a road and paint the lines into a wall. Yeah. So that's where I was debating. I was like, do I bring this up?
It's like, I feel like that sounds like a Roadrunner type of cartoon scenario.
Yeah, but in a kind of messed up way.
You're totally right. Like, I think that just goes back to Wile E. Coyote. That goes back to the whole, there's a lot of implications that bringing connectivity to the car has, because you're putting connectivity into a vehicle that has critical safety features. And like security is a huge issue. Safety is a huge issue. And it is something that, is greatly considered as these systems are being designed. Backup systems, functional safety. I think that just kind of speaks to that point, because I think there is going to be some sort of connectivity, whether it's in the lamppost or better painted line or something like that. But it's, maybe it's connected lane lines on the road. Who knows?
Right.
But it's it's going to happen in order to have these better connected systems. There will be a dollar amount tied to it that makes sense, whether it's like healthcare costs being reduced, and so therefore that's there's a whole bunch of ideas of how you can trade off and really make the business case for connectivity in the car, and going into government infrastructure that might be paying for it, or private infrastructure that might be paying for it that you opt in for. There's a lot, but it really does. There is a huge critical component of safety and security when it comes to connectivity being added into the car.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, Kellen. Now I'm thinking about cars as Coyote, and I'm like, the Coyote's not an intelligent thing, and now we're talking about smart cars. I feel like we just kind of did this over. But all right, let's transition quickly into the Ask IoT questions. I'm just going to pick two of them out because I think we've talked a little bit about them, but if we just want to succinctly go through them, that'd be great. So we talked a lot about 5G, but and LiDAR we mentioned. But what other technologies not called 5G, let's say, Hope, do you believe will have the greatest impact on the automotive space going forward?
From a connectivity standpoint, I think we will have 5G will be one of the bigger impacts. I think that people most people don't necessarily know about DSRC, which is what has been around a long time and is a Wi-Fi based standard or protocol that is used for vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to everything communication. I think that, as our legislative bodies are deciding what standard to use, I think we'll see a mixture of DSRC and 5G, especially since 5G isn't necessarily rolled out yet for the automotive space or just in general. So I think that these are going to be some of the big protocols that have a big impact on automotive connectivity.
Great. And then the second question, which we've kind of talked about these things already, it seems like in our conversation, but maybe we just summarize them up for the listeners, which is what are the biggest hindrance to autonomous cars becoming mainstream? I know we've talked about kind of the perception. Obviously, there's a technology component there, but what are some other things that maybe we're not thinking about that would be kind of a hindrance to autonomous cars really getting out there?
I think it's the ecosystem. Okay. I think it's the perception, the consumer's perception of connectivity in the autonomous car. I think it's legislative. Just, what standard do we adopt? And I mean, governmental bodies from an infrastructure standpoint, what will they invest? Or like I said, private entities that maybe will allow people to opt in to utilize the business case. I think that it's just kind of all of those things that are wrapped up that kind of influences the ecosystem for autonomous and connected cars that will, I guess that's the biggest hindrance. It's the ecosystem.
Yeah, I view it as ecosystem and infrastructure. So on the infrastructure side, this goes back to what we're talking about regarding having to build from the past. So if moving to a fully autonomous future for vehicles means reshaping the landscape or cities or how we do parking, all of these things are actual physical things in the world, like concrete or parking garages that might need to change. But if they are physical structures, there's often a lot of investment that's already gone into them. So to tear them down in favor of something new, it just takes time. So I think past infrastructure might be a hindrance. And then, I totally agree on the ecosystem front. If in areas in which one organization can do something alone, then it really just comes to how fast can the organization do this thing. But if it's something that requires many different parties, which autonomous vehicles do, because it requires stakeholders in the form of governments from the legislative side. It requires all the different manufacturers working together to standardize or to have standards around connectivity. It requires many, many different pieces. And that's what an ecosystem means, is that there's these different players that serve different roles, but need to work together for the general health of the ecosystem. But that also means that it could be as slow as whatever the slowest critical piece of that ecosystem is. So bringing everyone along for the ride, the technology might be there, but maybe it's legislation that slows things down. Maybe it's the lack of connected light posts or painted roads or whatever it may be. So I agree with you. I think ecosystem, and then also to me, infrastructure are some of the barriers that might slow adoption of or widespread adoption of autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, the legacy infrastructure, I think is what you're hitting on, which I think is a really great point.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So before we sign off here, I wanted to ask you something. I know we kind of talked about this in the pre-interview, and I think it's really important to talk about. But I wanted to ask you about something that really stood out to me when I was doing my research. And it seems like you're quite active in organizations both within and outside of Texas Instruments that focuses on empowering women in the tech industry, as well as encouraging equality in STEM education for girls who are looking to pursue tech fields, for instance. So, and one of them, I guess, was the Bay Area Women's Initiative, which is as well as High Tech High Heels Board of Directors, as you're involved in that. All seemed very interesting from just kind of my general research. But what do you see as the biggest hurdles or challenges in getting women into the tech industry? Does it start at a young age, or what advice do you have for maybe the women out there looking to break into the tech industry, whether as an engineer or some other role? Also, we probably have a lot of parents maybe out listening who have daughters who are shown interest in STEM. And what is your advice to them to kind of keep them motivated, to keep them going down this path? Because what you mentioned earlier is they do get deterred. But how do we kind of avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge subject that's I'm very passionate about, and I am very involved. Yeah, High Tech High Heels is an organization that's based in Dallas, and I helped expand here to the Bay Area. I'm involved in the Women's Initiative here at Texas Instruments, and I think that my goal is just I want to get more girls into STEM education, and then further into their careers, and build women up in their careers. And that goes for, women across the board, diversity, and inclusion for it just really affects everything. And I think that there's a huge business case in general, but it's also just the right thing to do, because it allows for so much more innovation. I can only imagine what we're leaving on the table with, if we have very similar, like-minded people, similar backgrounds in the room. And innovation comes from, diversity and struggle and challenging status quo, looking at something from a different perspective. And so I think that, we just need more diversity in the tech world. And I think that, one aspect of that is getting more girls into STEM, and especially girls of color. We need more women in general in the tech world. So I would say that, to people listening, if you have a young girl that is interested in math and science, just keep encouraging them. Tell them that they're good at math and science. That's a very important thing. It's scientifically proven. Studies have been done that girls lose their confidence starting as early as 4th grade. And having that encouragement actually really helps. Get them a mentor, whether it's, a colleague at work or someone in the the STEM world. Connect them, just connect the dots and introduce your these young girls to people that can help them see themselves in that career. This is data backed stuff. I do have a blog article that I could link that kind of connects all the data to this. But anecdotally speaking, that's something that happened for me. My dad and my parents, they just they encouraged me from a young age. My teachers told me I was good at math. They connected me to mentors from an early age. And that's how I ended up studying electrical engineering. So, all that encouragement and just multiple touch points. That's what I'd recommend to those who are listening.
Yeah, I will say that your excitement and enthusiasm exhibited through this conversation, it's very infectious. So I think if we could have more women out there doing those kinds of things, I think that'd be incredible. So I appreciate you kind of sharing and shedding a little light onto that. We will put any links you want in our in the description and the show notes, so that if people listen to this part of the show and are like, wow, my daughter would benefit from this kind of guidance, here's a way to kind of go about it. So reading that article, whatever it may be, we'll definitely would love to share that. But before we sign off here, are there, I guess, if people wanted to follow up and talk to you just specifically maybe about the STEM aspect or anything we talked about in general, is there a way you like people to kind of engage with you? Like, is it through Twitter, LinkedIn, anything kind of on the social front?
Yeah,
Okay.
LinkedIn, please. My name's Hope Bavenzi, and I think I'm the only Hope Bavenzi out there. So it should be pretty straightforward to find me on LinkedIn. All
right. Well, we really appreciate your time. I thought this conversation was great. Hopefully we'll have you back at some point. So thanks for taking some time to chat with Caleb and I.
Thank you guys. It was a great conversation. And it's fun to talk about all the possibilities that there are for the connected car and connected future.
Totally agree. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week on the IoT for All podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave us a rating or review and be sure to subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Also, if you have a guest you'd like to see on the show, please drop us a note at ryan@iotforall.com and we'll do everything we can to get them as a featured guest. Other than that, thanks again for listening and we'll see you next time.